Well, first, I just want to thank everybody for coming today. My name's Lee Limerick. I was a buddy of his. He was my buddy. And I want to welcome you to a very Murphy Christmas. It needs a little explanation. I just thought I could, the only reason I'm up here, because I don't like doing this, is that I thought that I would explain why we've been listening to Christmas music for the past hour and why this guy is standing over my shoulder. I'll just preface this by saying I don't like white after Labor Day. I don't like Christmas music before Thanksgiving. But our friend Murph loved it, and a lot of people told me this week he did listen to it all through the year. He sent me a Dropbox collection of his own Christmas music that he digitized. He has a lot of Christmas records, and he was very insistent that I listen to his Christmas music last the holiday season. And when I didn't open it, he was, have you opened it? You need to open it. You need to download it. Okay. So last night I was thinking about all this and how Murph was extremely nostalgic. He kept everything. His whole life was archiving, and he was very sentimental, and he was generous, and he was thoughtful, and he was kind, and he never forgot anyone's name or their story. And I don't want this to get out of the room, because this is powerful information that I'm trusting you all to keep a secret. But because of all those things, I'm now convinced that Murph is at the North Pole. He was trying to be low-key about it, but I'm on to his game. So I must have been on the nice list this year because Santa came early and was very good to me this week. Because of Murph, my world has now become much smaller because his family was huge. And Joe, you arrived this week thinking you were the last of your line. And while I guess that's technically correct, you now know that we were all his family. And after this week, many of you are my family now. And Murph and I had a whole lot in common. I met him in 2002 when I was working for public television. And a bunch of us got together for lunch one day, and I ended up sitting directly across from him. I'm sorry. We hit it off immediately, and over the years, I always enjoyed running into him, usually while we were working, and we'd always have something to laugh about. So one night, about 6 years ago, I was having dinner at Eaton Park with my ex and my kids, because that's what all the cool people do on Saturday nights around here is we go to Eaton Park. If you're not there, you're missing out. So we were about done with our meal, and Murph walked in and sat down at the booth across from us by himself. And as always, I was happy to see him. And because I'm kind of rude that way, I just invited myself to join him for a while. So I lived around the corner at the time, and I told Jeff and my boys to go ahead without me, and I'd see them at home. So this was about 7 o'clock that night. Murph and I had a great time catching up, as we always did, and he, of course, had a lot of stories to tell. So after a while, my phone rang, and it was Jeff asking if I was okay. Of course I'm okay. Why? He said, Lee, it's 11 o'clock. I've been sitting there with Murph for 4 hours. So we started meeting there on a fairly regular basis. There was a picture from the last time we went in the video that I have. It was the only picture I ever took of him in 6 years ago in Eaton Park, and it was the last time we went. We talk about a lot of things. We talk about weird stuff that we liked and wanted to share with each other. Junk we'd find. And actually, I brought props, like I said. This kind of says a lot. I just discovered these last night. This is me. And this is Murph. Zingers from the Hollywood Squares. Because we'd sit there and we'd talk about Peter Marshall, Marty Allen, Ed Asner, Mel Brooks, Charo, John Davidson, Dom DeLuise, Sandy Duncan, and what have you, and especially Paul Lynde. There was a lot of talk about Paul Lynde. Not ashamed of it. But most of all, he'd tell me all these wonderful stories that he had about the people we both knew and about so many of his friends that I'd never met. And believe it or not, Sometimes we even talked about politics. This week, I've talked to several of his friends who up until now I'd only heard about. And in those conversations, I've heard two things repeatedly. One, that he could drive you absolutely nuts talking about his political stance, which swung far to the left. Surprise. And two, that man had the biggest heart of anyone they'd ever know. And over again, I heard those two things mentioned together. So I was thinking about it, and the term bleeding heart liberal doesn't get tossed around much like it used to. Murph was such a bleeding heart, he probably should have bled out decades ago. We're all overdue for this. But I thought about the meaning of that term, bleeding heart liberal. And it's someone whose views and values are so absolutely ruled by feeling and compassion that they're kind of blind to pragmatism and practicality. And Murph was such a deeply feeling person, and that's what defined him as a person. So at a time where people are sharply divided in a lot of ways, I think his memory is a really good reminder to put people before politics, because ultimately it doesn't matter. You didn't have to agree with Murph to love him, and we all loved him. I love my buddy so much. And I happen to know that nobody in this room is on the naughty list. So I'd like to invite John Nakashima up, who is a friend of Murph's and mine.
Okay, I'm John Nakashima. I'm the senior producer at West Virginia Public Broadcasting in Morgantown. And we at PBS, I believe, are the people who have worked with Murph the longest. I started in '75, and it was WWVU TV. And I can't tell you when Murph started, but one estimate is 1985. But it could have been earlier. We speculate that Murph was an intern for 5 years. When no one was leaving and he wanted a job, I believe. But he loved TV from the very beginning. In 1983, Murph was there during some of the very bad days, and then during the heyday of public broadcasting. At first, Gregory Van Camp was our station manager. He had fought for years to prevent the consolidation of the 3 public television stations. We finally lost, and the staff was given the option to stay with the university or to go with the new public broadcasting station, WNPB. Whether it was Murph, whatever it was, I wrote this and I didn't proofread it at all. Whenever it was that Murph started at public broadcasting, he was public broadcasting all the way. He was part of the mission, working for low wages because he believed in the cause. He was paid hourly, and often he didn't declare his overtime. Of course, he rarely got his timesheet in on time. The people in the production department, which included Murph, had pulled off a coup. We had shifted from a news operation to documentaries. We had overthrown the direction of the station, and Murph was there. Murph went on thousands of shoots, I'd have to say. Our first big series was called Vandalia Sampler, which was a training ground where we made documentaries, where we learned how to make documentaries. And some were terrible, some were wonderful, some were somewhere in between. Often we'd have a shoot in southern West Virginia. The lighting's changing. Encountering a situation that had changed radically from what we had set up, and we'd do our best to come back. We'd be in people's homes. We went into hundreds of people's homes, and you don't know how strange it is to, try to act like this is normal. And, you discover things like they only had one outlet or, things like that. Let's see. I always wanted, some of these days would be like 12, 16-hour days. Murph never complained. He never stopped talking. Um, I always wanted Murph to come along on my shoots, and for many reasons. He was a fascinating conversationalist. He had a super strong opinion about everything. His diatribes about the theories of the world were sometimes strange but fascinating. If you found a hole in his logic, he would actually listen to your contrary argument and either agree or raise the temperature of the discussion. And sometimes things got pretty heated. To Murph, nothing was sacred except later sports. But his public broadcasting days and essentially his whole life was full. He was full out irreverent, and he would never attack the downtrodden. It was the pompous and powerful he would attack. I found him, if I wasn't mad at him, hilarious. He would mimic. His mimicking of people was spot on. First, he had a great talent to distort his face into something close to his attackee, and then he would capture the nuances of the voice. Sometimes he'd make me laugh so hard I'd cry. When he would, then he would have some kind of composed short monologue for Arch Moore or A. James Manchin or even Gregory Van Camp. I would say he was a master of improv. Murph and I, and Murph and his coworkers, over the years developed a strong bond. He would grow on you, I would say, if he liked you. And Murph and I liked each other a whole lot. And I wasn't the only one. There were year after year of new interns, new employees who would find the guilty pleasure of the always opinionated Murph. He made himself into a very much a professional television production person, way above any of the locals at the time. He was a seasoned pro, and he just became more and more seasoned. And you needed his you needed his talents in production and post-production. He was also a generous and great teacher and helped many people start their television and radio production careers. He loved vintage film. He loved kitsch and video production gear. Early on, a few months after he moved into his house, I went over to his house. I was stunned. This was a long time ago, before his collection grew, at the history of television equipment that was crammed into his little house. Outdated cameras, microphones, monitors, professional videotape recorders, Mole Richardson Hollywood-style lights, beautiful pinball machines. I walked into his kitchen and I was curious. Surely the oven was empty and unused. And I opened the oven, and there was Murph's standing files, his income tax, his receipts, his bank statements in the oven. Of course, it only made sense because he would never use the oven. Murph and I went down to southern West Virginia, and we ran into a politician we both knew. And we talked a long time, trying to outdo each other. Suddenly, Murph and I started talking about Mark Twain imitators. Hal Holbrook had been doing it for a long time. And on PBS, there was suddenly this rash of Mark Twain shows for Fun Drive. And Murph started doing hackneyed Mark Twain imitations. This will be hard for me to do. Murph doing Mark Twain imitations, but I'll try. Cauliflower is nothing but cabbage with a college education. And then Murph went on. When I was younger, I could remember anything, whether it happened or not. And denial isn't just a river in Egypt. And he went on, and I noticed this politician was not laughing, but glaring at Murph. Murph went on with what seemed to me like 5 minutes. I was amazed how many Mark Twain quotes Murph knew. Finally, when Murph ran out of material, the political friend of ours, who apparently we didn't know well enough, made eye contact with Murph and said, "You know, Murph, I'm a Mark Twain imitator, and I do it professionally." Now, that was the only time I actually saw Murph show a look of true embarrassment. It was like some people say, "Have you ever seen Murph run?" I've never seen Murph run. I have never seen Murph embarrassed, and it was a great lesson to me. Last page. Anyway, since Murph left public television, we think maybe in 1998, as his good friend Pat Sargent says, it seems like he never left. He'd stop by after work all the time. He was always proposing to me different plots to fix things that we hated in West Virginia. He'd always make the rounds and get Larry Dowling going, who was a graduate assistant at radio and television. He'd get Pat Sargent and Shaq going about sports and the many games they had worked on. He'd get Chip Hitchcock appalled about some of his more weird ideas. And I think we would have missed Murph, but he never really went away. But Murph's heart of gold was always there. He mixed in with his most offensive stories at least one touching tale of how great someone was doing or wonderful things that people were doing. It was stunning sometimes what a big heart Murph had, and we're really going to miss him. He was the only Murphy I ever knew. He was the only Murph I ever knew. Murph created himself, and what a brilliant original invention he was. And now, Joe Tinsley.
Well, I guess as you guys have heard, my name is Joe Tinsley. I'm little brother EI. And I just really want to thank everybody for coming tonight. It means a lot to me and my family. All the Mountaineer families, it's been unbelievable for him. It's made such a big impact on me. I'm trying to keep it together here. Just all the family and stories I've heard this week and things, because he's a good heart. Come from a really good family. It was really just me and my brother growing up, and we had three moms. I had two moms and an aunt that grew up with us in the same household, and pretty much everybody has passed but me now, so he's left it all to me to take care of all, keep on going with the name. I'm actually lost for words. I really don't know what to say except for thank you, everybody, so much for supporting him. And we talked at least once, if not two times a week, and we would talk about sports and, things of that nature, things around the school and stuff like that. But we did never, ever talked about politics. Never. There was this one thing we just never did. It was so funny. But, again, I just can't thank you people enough, everybody here, the Mountaineer family and him, and just, there's a song I want to play. It means a lot to our family. Thank you.
Good evening. Before I get started, I wanted to recognize a few people here tonight. Lee Limerick, who obviously just spoke. I want to recognize Lee tonight. Lee was there for Murph in the last 4 days of his life when he needed her most. Lee's selfless care and dedication to Murph, the countless hours she spent on the phone updating all of us, being the voice for Murph when he needed her most, speak immensely to who she is as a person. And Murph was so blessed to have her in his life I just think that's amazing, Lee, and I want to recognize you for that. And I'm blessed to call you my friend, and I know Murph was so blessed to have you in his life. Thank you. I want to recognize my mom and my dad here tonight, Phil and Suzanne Magro. Murph, they welcomed Murph into their house multiple times a month. We would have fellowship, we would pray, we would break bread, and Murph was family for us, and we were family for him. And so thank you guys for that. I want to recognize Dan Lohman there in the back. Dan, that video, Dan put together that video, guys. That was amazing. And what an awesome tribute to Murph, our friend that was. So thank you, Dan. That was awesome. It warms my heart greatly to see all of you here tonight. It's just amazing to see all the different walks of life, if you will, all the different people that are here that Murph had relationships with. You know, all of us felt so close to Murph, I would imagine. And yet, you know, as we talk to people, you find out that Murph had, you know, friendships with other people that he was very close with that you may have never heard of. And Murph was such a unique individual, and he cared so much about people and relationships and friendships. It was amazing. So, I think as I said, Mark Magro here, local boy, hometown boy. I played football at WVU from 2003 to 2007. And that is precisely when I met Murph. A lot of the student athletes in the room tonight, and even fans and so forth, you can imagine how chaotic and, you know, busy student athletes are in their college days, getting their degree and trying to be productive on the field, in the athletic field. So I've known Murph for 18 years, but those first 4 years of our friendship, I didn't really get to know Murph a great deal because I was obviously busy getting my education and playing football. But as Murph does, you know, Murph, a common theme, resounding theme that you're hearing tonight and from that video, Murph just cared about people. He had a desire and a passion to have relationships with others. And, you know, in the brotherhood of the football, when we're in a lot of stressful, obviously, situations and environments, you know, we weren't shy to tell each other that we loved each other. And, you know, that was how we were that way with Murph. You know, we told Murph he loved us, and he was family. Most of you know me well. I'm not very funny, but I was going to try to make some light and tell somewhat of a funny story about Murph. So as I told you, I didn't know Murph very well my first 4 years in college. I mean, we knew each other and we had a good friendship, but it's not like we were knew each other like we did the past 14 years. So my college days are over, and I'm floating around the NFL in 2008. And it's October, mid-October, and I get picked up by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Murph finds out, and as Murph always does, caring, loving, Murph gives me a call and says, hey Mark, congratulations, I hear you're going to Tampa. Hey, I've got a good friend, ex-roommate, my best friend, he lives in Tampa. His name's Buck Kessler. Maybe you could live with him. Yeah, that's a great. I was like, oh, okay, all right, Murph. All right. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, I may be there today, tomorrow, gone. You know, the next day with the NFL. You never know. And I was only there 2 months, but you know, I was like, well, tell me about Buck. Tell me about this guy. I mean, I'm gonna live with him. Well, sure enough, I go down to Tampa. You know, as the NFL is, you know, it's a volatile career, and I didn't want to run a place, buy a place, surely, or anything. So I go meet this Buck guy, and I ended up living with Buck for 2 months when I was in Tampa. And Murph and I share a lot of friends, as there's a lot of you in the room tonight that we have in common. So I lived with Buck for two months, and, you know, that is a common thread. Buck is a common thread that Murph and I have. Over the past 14 years of Murph and I's relationship, Buck is always in conversation. When Murph and I are talking, Buck's in the conversation. But, you know, it's come up in some of the speakers and in the videos and so forth, but Buck and Murph could not be more opposites than they are. I mean, Buck is ex-Navy. He's very disciplined, very blunt. He's far right. And, I mean, Murph and Buck are just complete opposites. And I'm this little mouse in the middle, just they're always bickering at each other and, you know, fighting like little girls. And I'm like, come on, guys, we know what irritates each other. We got to just talk about what we have in common. Buck, how's the weather down there in Florida? Huh? What's going on? You know, and so I'm always just trying to, you know, keep the peace per se. But as I've mentioned a few times, and as we've heard in the video with Grant speaking, and with McAfee and Owen and Pat, you know, Murph was family for us. Buck and Murph. Murph was family to us. He cared about us. He met us where we were at in our walks at WVU, and he just cared about us. That is the resounding theme, I think, from all of us, that Murph was a great friend to us, and he cared about us. He genuinely cared about us. In closing, and kind of closing here, as I look back on my relationship with Murph, and I think about the times that we spent together, a lot of it was over fellowship, prayer, and breaking bread. Murph and I like to eat a little bit, even though my mom and I, as we were talking, you know, we'd be sitting there at the dinner table or whatnot, and Murph he didn't eat a lot, but because he'd talk a lot, but he was always picking out his food. He never ate, but a lot of our time was spent over lunch or dinner. And in mourning Murphy's loss, and thinking about our time together, you know, like I said, I think about a lot of what we did, and in that, as in your mourning a friend's loss, you can't help but think of some of the age-old questions about what's life about, what's death, is there eternity, what is this? And Murph and I had some deep discussions, and in Murph's last days, I talked to him numerous times. I prayed with him Friday morning before his second surgery. And, you know, a topic that came up numerous times in Murph and I's discussions was this topic of faith and this topic of hope. And there's a statistic that's out there that shows that in America today, there is a huge percentage, especially in the youth, that have a lack of hope. And when I think about this, I can't help but think about my faith and my hope in Jesus Christ. I was raised Christian, and it's just part of my life and part of who I am. And Murph knew that, and we were, like I said, had discussions about this numerous times. And the biblical definition of faith is found in Hebrews 11:1. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. And I've been mulling over this for the past few months. The Lord has just placed this on my heart. And a lot of you are probably brighter than me, and it's taken me a long time to work through this as the Lord's been impressing this upon my heart. But when you break down this definition of faith, when you look at the word substance is the physical matter of something. Hope, that which is desired can be had. Evidence, the proof, or something that proves or disproves something. You can't disagree with a statistic because it's just data. But I really do not agree with that. I think that this world has hope, that is putting their hope in things that don't show up, that don't have substance and evidence. And just from speaking from my experiences, that's all we can do. You know, as I was talking with Murph, in times like this when we're mourning a lost loved one, I find peace in my hope and my faith in my relationship with Christ. And that's just something I wanted to share today and extend. It's never too late to place your hope in Jesus Christ. And as Murph and I have talked about this numerous times, it's something I wanted to share. And, you know, Murph is going to be sorely missed by my family, my mom and my dad. And, you know, we love Murph. And just want to thank everybody for coming out. And at this point, we want to open up the mic to anybody that wants to come up and talk about their experiences with Murph. And feel free, as we are all family. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Willie Edwards, and I played football here at WVU from 1984 to 1988. And I can't honestly tell you when I met Murph. Somehow he just showed up in my life. I honestly, I can't. It's amazing how it happened. Seems like went to sleep one day, woke up the next day, and there was Murph. So. Because I was trying to think back, okay, when did I really meet Murph? Because, you know, I kind of saw him around, you know, like Mark was saying, when you're playing football and you're in school, you got a lot of stuff going on, you remember faces, but you really don't have that depth as far as in a relationship with someone. And like I said again, I'm not sure when I met Murph, but probably about the third time we talked, he said, "Love you, Willie." And I was like, I barely know you. How you can tell me you love me? And I felt it was uncomfortable. I was like, I love you too, Murph. I mean, I didn't know what to do, so it would be rude not to tell him you loved him. And so over time, it got to a point where I would always try to beat him to the punch. Love you, Murph, but for some reason, he always beat me to it, and it drove me nuts that I couldn't tell him I loved him first. And like I said, the relationship was unique, and I would say Murph he was good at setting things up, because we'd have a conversation, and he would say something that was totally just out there, and then the next time I saw him, he would say something else, and I was like, oh, okay, so what he said last time, he was setting up, he did that all the time, so I kind of figured him out after a while, but then he would change up on me, which... I mean, if you're friends with Murph you would never get the same thing from Murph every time you talk to him. So he was pretty interesting when you talk to him. So one year he called me, he's like, "Hey, I got you something for your birthday," and I was like, again, why would you get me something for my birthday? I mean, I was probably like in my 40s, and I was like, why would he get me something for my birthday? That's weird. I'm like, okay, all right. If he wants to give me something, that's on him. So, so the next time we saw each other, he goes, "Hey, I got your birthday gift," and I was like, okay. I was excited. I was like, he must have got me something pretty good, maybe like a old, you know, VHS tape of, you know, a game I played in back in the '80s or something like that. It was a Tonka toy truck, and he goes, "Here you go, Willie. Happy birthday." And thanks, Murph. and that was it. I have nothing else to say. He got me a Tonka toy truck. It was a bulldozer at that. And I still have it. And I plan on keeping it. So Murph was an amazing person. And I've talked to a couple of the guys that, and the thing we talked about the most was how Murph knew your story. And it is amazing how he knew so many different people. How did he have the time to have those relationships with people? Now, not just on the surface. I mean, know who your family are. I mean, know what you've been through. And he was so concerned about me because I had worked at Milan for about 22 years. And 2 years ago, they just laid me off. And I was, you know, I got a family, got a mortgage, all kind of stuff. And the Murph was like, "Hey, if you need anything, you let me know, and I'll help you." And I was like, "Murph, I got this. I'll be all right." But he would always say, "Hey, Willie, you need anything?" "Murph, I'm good." He called me 2 days later. Hey, Willie, you need anything? I said, Murph, if I need something, I will call you. I said, you know what I need, Murph? I need you to quit asking me that. Nope, 2 days later. Hey, Willie, you okay? You need anything? But that was the type of person he was, and he's going to be missed. It's going to be tough to walk down that tunnel and walk out on the field, because for so long, probably 20 years, or maybe 15 years, and we would walk, I know all the guys, we'd walk down on the field, and the first thing we did was go to that camera right there in the end zone and talk to Murph. That was the first thing you did. You didn't do anything. I know that's what I did. I would go find Murph. Hey, Murph, I'm here. He just wanted to know you were there and say, hey, love you, buddy. And I'm definitely going to miss it. And it's going to be tough to walk down there, and whoever that person is who's going to be manning that camera, whew, boy, he's got some large shoes to fill. So thank you.
'Tis the gift to be simple, 'tis the gift to be free, 'tis the gift to come down where we ought to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, it will be in the valley of love and delight. When true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend, we will not be ashamed. To turn will be our delight, till by turning, we come round right. 'Tis the gift to be simple, 'tis the gift to be free, 'tis the gift to come down where we ought to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, it will be in the valley of love and delight. Thank you, Murph, for your many gifts you shared with us, simplicity being just one of them. You will be missed, my friend. Rest in peace. As we close our program tonight, it's only fitting, and Murph would want it this way, that we all sing together, Country Roads.